The water's fine. This water.
Are we all impressed how professional this is?
If you are milling about, we love that, which is why we have an after party. But if you could find your numbered seat, that would be great.
Yes.
The numbers are on the back of the seats and on the back of your lanyard. That worked.
That was nice.
That really worked.
All right. Well, I think more people coming from inside.
Great. Nice to see everybody. Hello.
Hello. I think we had some train issues, supposedly.
We have train issues,
Train issues. Albany was closed. Albany train, I heard, closed down.
plane issues,
Plane issues.
ferry issues.
Ferry issues as well.
Yep. So it's good to see everybody here.
Yeah. If you came, you're lucky.
I actually started my day in Toronto, and I left the house and flew to LaGuardia. I took one step outside of LaGuardia and fell. Fuck ice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I came up with that without ChatGPT. It's too newsy for ChatGPT, actually. Thank you all for being here. There's still some people milling in, which is great. We expect people to continue to mill in as they get off the subway, make their way over snowbanks.
Yes.
And here.
But good evening, and welcome to the first Highrise. And we're really excited that you guys are all here. If you're here tonight, that means you actually really care about the cannabis industry, or versus what's trending on LinkedIn these days. I'm Joanne Wilson. I am the founder of Cannabis, a cannabis store that believes in design, culture, and community, and things that actually matter.
And I'm Jay. I care about things that don't matter. Like, just kidding. Like a daily cannabis newsletter, which if you don't get it yet, you can find it at cultivated.news. That's cultivated.news. Jeremy over here, who is my co-founder, but our editor-in-chief, he makes sure it looks and reads beautifully every morning. So get that in your inbox, and you will be a smarter cannabis person every day. And you'll hear from Joanne sometimes, too.
Yes, I agree. It's the best newsletter out there in the cannabis industry. So Jay and I are your co-hosts tonight. We'll be ushering the panels and what's happening. And this is not your typical cannabis event. We're trying to create something new. There will not be PowerPoint presentations at this event. It'll be much more conversational. We'll continue the conversation afterwards into an after party.
Yes, and that's my favorite, improv thing. Yes. And there is a QR code, which you will see on your programs and on the screens. That QR code will allow you to ask questions after every speaker, after every panel. It's coming directly to my computer here, and so we'll be able to curate those, consolidate those, get them to the panelists as they come in. So that's part one of the housekeeping. Two, this is also streaming on LinkedIn, which won't matter to you per se, but hello out there to the World Wide Web and people watching on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining. We look forward to having you and you being part of this conversation. And I'll try to put a link to the questions also for you on LinkedIn so you can ask as well. The QR code, the streaming, sponsors. We have friendly sponsors that made this all possible.
Yes, thanks to our sponsors.
Yes, our presenting partners are MFNY and NABIS, so thank you. Our supporting partners are, yes.
Yay.
Yes.
They're still around, thank God.
As of print time. No, I'm just kidding. Our supporting partners, Furstein and Kulik and Dutchy. I know there's people from both of those places here tonight. Yes.
Yes.
Right in the front row.
Right in the front row.
Dutchy, some people over here. And our community partners, PAX, Heirloom, Green Thumb Industries, Jaunty, SaltPay, and Metric. So thank you all for being here and being partners of ours during this. And as you came in, if you were the careful-eyed people were watching the screens, there was something rotating on the screens, which I think was really cool and interesting and fun, and it was from our partners at Lit Alerts. There's three things that you'll start to see in our newsletter, cultivated.news. Find it and get it if you don't already. From our partners at Lit Alerts, one was a brand power rankings, which we will publish on a monthly basis about brands here in New York. We'll describe sort of how that came to be in future newsletters, but you will see that of the top 3 spots, all 3 are partners here tonight, so that's exciting. So thank you very much, and thank you, Little Alerts Rick. Thanks for making that all possible. There's also something called the East Coast Eighth Index, the price of an eighth in different markets, so we'll be tracking that as well, and challenger brands in different markets, which are brands that are nipping at the heels of the top 10. So keep a lookout for that in our newsletter, again, at cultivated.news. Shameless plug.
No, shameless is okay. I'm okay with being shameless. So how much longer do we have
It's a good question.
her to come on? Jeremy?
Jeremy doesn't know.
No, Jeremy doesn't?
We're
Okay.
vamping. Yeah.
We're vamping.
We're vamping.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Good. I will say one thing. Can I say a couple things?
You can.
I looked all the people that bought tickets and were coming and were friends of friends and friends and family and sponsors and sponsor people. This group is far and wide, and it was not an easy week to travel. There are people from Florida, the tan one who looks very unhappy to be in this weather. I flew in from Toronto today, so I had to wear my
Canadian
Canadian
goods.
stuff,
Yep.
even though I'm American. But I do have a Canadian pin. I should have brought one for everybody. That would have been a nice treat. There are people that were part of Cultivated's 30 in their 30s, Wyatt, and some others, but thank you all for being part of that. We had people come in from way out of town too, not only Florida, but I think Colorado, Washington, California, the Midwest as well. So thank you all for being here because, again, it was not difficult to get to New York. It might have been difficult to get from the sidewalk to here. So thank you all again for that. Joanne,
Yes.
we started talking about this event like more than a year ago.
Easily a year ago. Yeah. And here we are.
Here we are. Congratulations for both of us for still being here. And the industry has changed dramatically since then, and even more dramatic, at least the conversation around rescheduling, certainly over the past month.
Totally. I mean, it's really, we're going to do this again in October. I'm sure it'll be a completely different set of conversations. I mean, we're excited to see the senator speak today because there's so much like nonsense coming out of the media and you don't know who to trust. Like, is DA really have the information they're going to sign? Is it actually going to happen? And unfortunately, there is no industry without the federal government. I mean, we need them to reschedule for research and banking and insurance and veterans access. And there's so many questions that aren't answered from them. And as we grow as an industry, I mean, we're like going to be an economic powerhouse. And one of the reasons we did this is because we need to be elevating the conversations we're having, and people in the government, as well as the businesses that we need to support us, unfortunately, banking and insurance, should be paying attention to a new economic powerhouse.
And with that segue,
Yes.
do you want to talk about what's coming up next?
Sure.
Well, first, Jeremy's going to be talking to the senator.
Yes, he
You're going
is.
to be in that seat over there, Jeremy.
Yes.
And the senator is with us in spirit and in voice and body. Not body, but voice and direct. She
Yes.
is in D.C.
Yes. There's a lot going on there right now.
Yes. Sometimes not enough, but
Truth.
also a lot. Jer?
Good to go.
Good to go.
So, good evening, everyone. We are very excited to have you all here today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Cultivated Media, co-founder with Jay. We cover the intersection of cannabis, business, and policy, specifically what happens, how laws are made, how the sausage is made, and how that affects all of your businesses. Tonight's conversation comes at a very pivotal moment for cannabis. I don't think that's news to anyone in this room. Cannabis policy is being debated across Congress. Federal agencies are, fingers crossed, reviewing rescheduling. And the legalization of cannabis has become a political flashpoint with campaigns to actually roll back legalization in states like Massachusetts and Arizona. So today, we're honored to be joined by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York to discuss where federal cannabis policy stands today, what progress realistically looks like, and where we go from here. So, Senator, thank you for being here.
In a minute.
In a
In a
minute.
minute.
In a minute. Okay.
In a minute.
Yeah.
But to give this a test run, if you have a question for the senator and you scan that QR code, it'll come directly to my computer. And I won't be taken necessarily in order, but if you're first, I'll likely ask the question. After Jeremy asks his
After
question.
Jeremy asks
Yes.
his questions, exactly. Yes.
I just also want to say that since the president made his announcement that he was going to, I forget the exact words, I don't know, push forward rescheduling, ask his administration to do so. The world has also shifted, not just on cannabis, but a lot of other things. We have
Venezuela,
Minnesota.
Iran.
Yeah, there's been a lot.
There's been a lot.
So there's been, so the focus on it in DC is not as strong as it was on December 18th or 19th.
Yes, and I was very impressed that he actually stayed awake to sign that document.
It is the one thing Joanne and the president agree on.
Yes. Rescheduling cannabis. I mean, the optimism in this, you all have to be optimists to be in this industry because it's so difficult. And what's hilarious is everyone in the government thinks that we're making a fortune. They have no idea that no one is making any money. But they seem to be making a lot of money, which is kind of interesting from us. So it's time to think about how we run our businesses grounded in data, having more information and doing research, which is why we brought research here, and actual outcomes. And so hopefully, you know, Kirsten can give us some really great information about what's really happening in Washington.
On that note, Jared.
On that note.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We'll roll with it. Can you?
Ta-da!
Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah.
Yay!
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. This is a room full of cannabis industry executives, policymakers, and lawyers. So we're very excited to have you today. The floor is yours if you'd like to address the room for a minute or two.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. It's so good to be here. I'm very excited about the conversation we're going to have about cannabis and how we can deschedule it and how we can continue to invest in our communities. At its core, this conversation is about the future of our country's economy, the health, the social equity, and public safety. The American people have made themselves clear. Most of Americans support full legalization at the federal level. Unfortunately, Washington is always behind the eight ball and continues to drag their feet in getting anything done to do this one thing. Unfortunately, Washington has been unwilling to do the work that's necessary. It's creating confusion and disparities across all levels of government, as well as for our small businesses and our entrepreneurs and Americans in general. A few years ago, I met with a group of moms who were advocating for therapeutic options for their kids, particularly kids with epilepsy. And therapeutic CBD did enormous good for their children, for their seizures. And it was one of the most meaningful meetings that I've had because this group of parents, they didn't know where to turn to make sure the medicine they were getting was actually tested at the right level and was addressing the needs of their child, because so many states just hadn't put in the laws that protected it. And the stigma that was in place, you know, this was 10 years ago, is still there, that too many members of Congress focus on cannabis as a gateway drug as opposed to a cure, or as opposed to something that adults can enjoy across the country. And so it's been very frustrating that we have not really gotten rid of the stigma still associated with cannabis. There's unfortunately no federal standards for potency testing or labeling for cannabis, and that becomes both a public safety and a public health issue. And as these moms described to me, consumers don't know what they're getting. Products meant for adults might not be the right dose for children. It might not have the right labeling for what they're buying, and that creates enormous anxiety for people who need access. I'm very grateful to our state regulators and industry leaders who are doing such good work and trying to do the work of coming up with safety standards and quality assurance systems that protect consumers. So I still very much want this to be done on the federal level as well. As everyone on this call knows, marijuana is a huge thriving industry. And it unfortunately still is not legal in all states. We have many states that have medical use. We have some states that have recreational use. But having 50 different ways of processing and different regulations and responsibilities for access to financial services, such as loans and payment processes, make it very difficult. And too many businesses have had to continue to maintain a cash-only business. It's unsafe, it's inefficient, it is bad for workers, it's bad for owners, it's bad for the whole ecosystem. The current administration's executive order to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to 3 is obviously a positive step in the right direction. It is not sufficient, however. It acknowledges what we know, that it is not in the same category as of drugs like heroin and other Schedule 1 drugs. But obviously, it's not enough. So I'm going to do everything I can to continue this march towards full descheduling, full legalization in all 50 states, to have a federal law, to have a federal standard. I think it would make all the difference in the world for our stakeholders, for our consumers, for our patients, for the people who really need access to this industry and access to these products. So I just want to thank everybody in the room for being at the forefront of trying to get this right for our state, New York, but also for our whole country. I remain committed to getting this done, and I'm very grateful for all the friends and all the outreach that this industry has done across our state and across the country. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. So you deserve credit in D.C. for being consistent about advocating for the full removal of cannabis from the list of federally controlled substances. In November of 2023, when former President Biden called on federal agencies to reschedule cannabis, you said the DEA should move with great urgency. So let me ask the obvious question to everyone in the room. What's the holdup? What are the federal dynamics at play that make this take so long if it seems to be an issue of such bipartisan consensus?
Yeah, I need a Republican leader to help me do the deregulation legislation. My staff has been reaching out to many of the senators who are from states that already have either recreational use or medical use, and we're just not getting the leadership that we need. And so I'm still working on that. But I think the biggest impediment is that we've not had presidential leadership in 20 years on this. It's been very frustrating that even under Democrat and Republican administrations, nobody wants to deschedule cannabis. If any president decided to deschedule cannabis, it would get done. And so that's been our biggest impediment, and I've been disappointed in both Democrats and Republicans consistently. This Schedule 1 to 3 was something Biden approved and Trump has allowed, but again, it should be moving us to full descheduling. So I'm going to work with whatever Republican leaders I can find to create a bipartisan and bicameral piece of legislation to fully deschedule it, and also to open up the markets so that people can have access to the stock exchanges, access to capital, access to the financial services industry. Even as a half measure, if I could get that financial services bill done and then work on descheduling, I would do that as well. So I'm going to keep looking for partners, and I think that is the biggest holdup we've had so far.
So, Senator, I want to pick up on that thread because you said two interesting things. One, you referred to the Safer Banking Act, that for those that don't know, a bill that would let cannabis companies access the financial system, much like any other business. You also said that you're looking for a Republican to help you lead this charge. What, ahead of the midterms, where Congress may change, what can lawmakers do to move the ball forward in a way that makes sense under the current political calculus?
So if I could find some Republican leaders who want to do this, we could try to get a vote, try to create advocacy so that communities that want full descheduling of cannabis can be heard. We could do press conferences. We could create a drumbeat. That's how you typically get things done. You have to change the weather. You have to make sure that people begin to realize this is a piece of legislation that needs to move. And my biggest impediment is a Dem-only bill just doesn't get us there because we don't control the House and the Senate. So one of the things I'm working on as well on a entirely side issue is I'm fighting to flip the Senate, and I'm running the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee to win some more Republican states and flip them blue, so I have better allies in doing the work to decriminalize and to make cannabis available in all 50 states.
And Senator, are there certain bills or certain issues where you feel like you can engender more of that bipartisan support in terms of cannabis reform? Considering the Safer Banking Act, which is very narrow but still meaningful to many people in this room, compared to something like the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act.
Yeah, so I do think there's opportunities for both bills, but I need a strong leader. We have pitched this to several senators who come from states that either have medical use, but also those who have recreational use. And so far, we've not gotten a taker yet. So we just need to keep raising this to the people, because the people can convince their representatives to support our bill and to support our ideas. So it's making it much more of a debated issue. I'd like it to be debated in these Senate races. I'd like it to be debated in the next presidential campaign. I think it has to be on the forefront of stakeholders and elected leaders' minds, that they have to answer to their constituents on it.
I want to zoom out a little bit from the actual mechanics of rescheduling to talk about the politics a little bit. Given what you hear from your constituents, what you hear from other lawmakers, how mainstream of an issue is cannabis policy? How much is this coming up in maybe not your day-to-day, but your week-to-week as you work your way through the Capitol?
Well, it comes up in New York all the time, because we have so many stakeholders and small businesses that are trying to take advantage of our state's investment in cannabis. We're doing a lot of community investment. We're doing a lot of equity investments. And these small businesses are desperate to be able to have a level playing field so they can grow, create jobs, and continue to invest in a thriving industry. A lot of our small businesses have gone out of business in the last few years. Many have sold their businesses to Canadian companies. Like, it's really not gone well in New York as it should. But it's largely because these federal policies are not supporting what they need. If you can't get a bank account, if you can't, list your company on the stock exchange, if you can't get the same access to capital as other competitors, and then if you don't have law enforcement shutting down the illegal businesses, you wind up getting hit on both sides. And so, in our own state, we've been working really hard to fix that problem, and our governor is very committed to it. And I haven't talked to the new mayor, but hopefully he will also be committed to it. I will put it on my agenda when I meet with him. But this is something that we just, again, have to keep elevating, because it's frustrating. It's frustrating for families who depend on it as an important medicine. It's frustrating to business owners who are trying to offer both medicinal and recreational use products. And it's frustrating to people who benefit from these products.
And so just sort of picking up what you're saying, it sounds like, the intention is there, but there are some structural roadblocks on the other side of the aisle to getting this done.
The Republican Party has just not been pro-cannabis lately. We used to have some senators, we used to have a Republican senator out of Colorado who was very helpful on this. There was pockets of Republicans who are willing to help us that are no longer in the Senate. So we just don't have a lead Republican who thinks this is important for his or her state. And that's a huge problem. So we need to somehow create the drumbeat so that people understand that their senators have to be supportive of what their states want.
And on the political question, I mean, when you and your team sit and think about this issue, we have seen support for legalization actually drop for the first time in polls this year among Republicans. It's still increasing among Democrats. Now, that being said, it's still, a 60-40 issue. It's still widely popular and bipartisan. But do you think that declining support will, move some fence sitters on the other side of the aisle maybe backwards a little bit? Is that a concern you have?
It will. So what I really want for the Republicans, I need President Trump to want to do cannabis. If I could get him convinced it was a great business.
Yeah.
And he changes his mind on things all the time. He used to hate the crypto business, and now he loves the crypto business.
Yeah.
So maybe we should offer him a cannabis license for New York so that he can make a ton of money, and then he will be for this industry. I don't know, but that's just one theory.
Thank you for the headline on tomorrow's newsletter. I appreciate that.
Offer President Trump a cannabis license. It'll work.
Yeah. Money talks, I guess.
Money talks. He's a businessman first.
Senator, I know you only have a short amount of time, and I want to sort of get to New York, your home state. New York launched one of the most ambitious, I think that's fair to say, social equity-focused cannabis programs in the United States. However, it has been a little bit rocky and filled with lawsuits. It's been a topsy-turvy rollout, to say the least. I think, many people in this room can attest. That's not news to everyone. What lessons can you take from how New York has set up its cannabis market at the federal level as you're sort of deciding and trying to create federal coherence around cannabis policy? Are there lessons you can learn? How do you think about it?
Well, so I'll give you some quick facts of New York so everybody knows. We have 2,008 total adult use active licenses with 519 operating adult use retail dispensaries, which is up from 261 in 2024. So we still are a growing industry. There's over $1.5 billion in total medical and adult use retail sales, the majority of which is driven by the adult use market. And the state has raised over $340 million in tax revenues for medical and adult use between 2023 and 2025. The state focus on our social and economic equity has been really profound. In 2025, we awarded about $5 million in grant funding to help licensed adult use retail dispensaries help with startup and operation costs like rent and security. Additionally, they invested another $5 million from cannabis tax revenue into 50 community-based organizations across the state. So New York really can be a role model in what can be done and what should be done. We had hiccups in the city in the last few years over enforcement. I can tell you the number of illegal cannabis shops that were, providing storefronts that we believe were leased by criminal networks was really a terrible story, because the legal owners were competing with people who had access to a huge amount of capital, illicit capital, but they did, and that made it very difficult for our stakeholders to survive and thrive. About over 50% of our adult use licenses were held by social and economic equity businesses, of which over 57% were women-owned and 50% are minority-owned. But a lot of these were first-time business owners. And so when they were up against an illicit market, they just couldn't compete. They didn't have the same access to capital. They didn't have the same support network or alignment that a lot of these illicit storefronts had. So we had to deal with that. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that over the last few months to clean that up. But I'd love to hear from stakeholders in the room if that has improved or if it's still a big impediment. Because if it is, I think it's something we should ask Mayor Mamdani to do in his 100 days. Like, just do something on the law enforcement side to fix this inequity, because it's really harming our ability of our stakeholders to survive.
Yeah. Very good point, Senator. As we're coming up on time here, I want to make this actionable for everyone in the room. Business leaders, policy folks in the cannabis space, what can they do to advocate this year for cannabis reform? What are some specific actions they can take? Is it a matter of showing up? We'd love to hear it from you.
Well, one idea, and a lot of advocacy groups do this, is have a Washington, D.C. day. And as a community, spend 2 days on the Hill where you visit with every senator, every House member that you get meetings with to talk about the cannabis industries in their state. I would also pay for a state-by-state analysis of how many cannabis businesses, how much revenue, how many patients, how many, whatever is appropriate for that state, to come up with the snapshot like I just read you for New York. Like, that is very persuasive to elected leaders that these businesses are important for the economy. And then those personal stories. Like, I was so persuaded. I did not have any leadership with regard to cannabis at all until I started meeting with constituents, both in the medical community and in the equity-based community, where the disproportionate enforcement in Black and brown communities was creating an enormous legacy of criminal records that were difficult for people to overcome because they couldn't get access to housing or to job opportunities or to 100 different things. And having the knowledge base to meet with those people, hear their lives, hear their stories about why cannabis mattered to them, how disproportionate enforcement harmed them, how getting a license made all the difference for them to be a business owner, that was extremely meaningful to me. And telling that story to senators and House members on a state-by-state basis would be extremely powerful. So doing a stories project, basically, and creating some advocacy opportunities for your community, I think would also make a big difference.
Yeah. So, we all clearly agree. We feel that the story about tax revenue, job creation, and economic justice is a very good one. We're just, shouting it from the mountaintops, and we want DC to hear it as well. So, Senator, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks to everyone in the room. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. We are still voting. We may shut down. We don't know what's happening, but we will try very hard to fund the things that matter and really stop ICE from just tearing apart communities and killing people. So we are very committed to working hard to solve the problems of the day. And God bless you all. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
I saw the staffer come in. It was time. Like, that guy was ready.
I saw
Totally.
Yeah, he was right on the stream.
Let's go.
Checking in. He was right in
Right
the
there,
room.
sir.
Right in the room with us. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jeremy. Don't go
and
too
there will be
far.
a sign up who wants to go to Washington.
Yeah. I just wrote down Highrise DC.
There you go.
Yeah. We'll do a shuttle. It'll be great. We'll all get on the Acela train and go down there together from here. That would be something.
That would be something. Yeah, would spread out. You know.
I actually prefer Joanne driving the bus.
Let's go. Yeah, I mean, I think that the amount of data that is out there now that we can even all run our businesses on is so different than it was 3 years ago. And when she talks about the illegal markets, which is so prevalent still here in New York State and certainly in New York City, I mean, it's all underground and it's all in the bodegas and you might not see it, but it's there. I'm sure all the police know where every little one of them are. But when you look at how much New York State is losing in taxes because of those businesses, those are real numbers. And so they should be focusing on that. All these Republicans have probably never smoked, so they really don't know what they're talking about. But, that could be an opportunity going down to Washington with a bunch of, pre-rolls.
Plenty of weed in DC too.
Exactly.
With that, and I think the senator brought it up that certainly her first introduction to this was around patient access and research that still needed to be done, which is our next panel as well. So I want to welcome up. Are they here? Green room. They're going to be in the green room. I'll make this very long. No, I'm just kidding. The green room's not very far away. Dr. Ben Caplan and Victorine Deych are going to join us to talk about advancing medical and consumer understanding around science and research. It's going to be a great conversation. Jeremy's going to lead that one too as soon as they appear.
Yes.
From the green room.
And this is something that we don't really talk about in the industry. And I have a feeling that this is sort of something we should all lean into, which will make a difference in Washington.
And again, it's the one thing the president and Joanne agree on, and it actually is the one thing he actually mentioned from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, proving that a broken clock can be right twice a day.
Totally. Listen, all of you in the back who don't have seats, because obviously some people weren't able to, come up and take a seat.
Yeah.
Please do. Come on in. Come on in. Take a seat.
Yeah.
Get in here. I like seeing these empty seats is so not good.
So, Dr. Caplan, Victorine, welcome to the stage.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for having us here. So we wanted to bring the conversation back to the medical and scientific research aspect of cannabis, and specifically paired Victorine and Ben, Dr. Caplan, up together so the industry could have a conversation with the medical side. And so I will let the panelists quickly introduce themselves, and then we can get into the questions. So why don't we start with you, Dr. Caplan?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Caplan. I'm a family doctor, board-certified licensed, the non-quacky sort. And my role, I think, in the industry is to help be a bridge, trying to educate the medical community, trying to educate the cannabis community on what's possible, what's realistic, what people actually want. I have the privilege of sitting on about 6 companies that survey close to 350,000 individual patient experiences. So I'm learning a lot about what is working for people, what isn't working, and that's what we'll talk about today. That sort of detail and data moves the needle more than what we're used to in science. The language is different. For those who don't know, cannabis wasn't, the endocannabinoid system wasn't even discovered until the 90s. So we're dealing with a professional community that's clueless, and it's nut jobs like me that take it on to learn ourselves and try to kind of voice up the mountain that hopefully can move the needle a little bit more in my world.
Victorine, I'll turn it to you. And your company is very cool, so please give us a little bit of insight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Victorine, as I was already introduced. I am the co-founder and the CEO of a company called Voice of the Plant. It is a multidimensional platform. The premise is a genetics company. We have a media component. We have a podcast. We have a product line that's going to be launched very soon in the state. My passion is around genetics and really protecting them and making sure that consumers, both on the medical and the recreational side, receive the highest quality product that they can for whatever purpose they're using it for. That is something I spend a lot of time on. It's really dear to my heart, and I'm excited to talk to Dr. Ben about it.
Yeah. Dr. Caplan, I want to start with you to frame up the conversation. And, we have various levels of scientific expertise in the room, so maybe we can start as simply as possible. From your clinical experience, your research background, what are the strongest pieces of evidence supporting medical cannabis today? What is medical cannabis used for? What types of ailments? And I guess, where do you see things going in the next 5 or 7 years?
Sure. Just a small slice of the world here.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about cannabis as like the cure-all. And that's weird for all of us because it seems quacky, like nothing cures all. We sort of know that. But the framework that cannabis works in is different than what we're used to. We're used to a sniper rifle. You take a pill, like a cholesterol pill, and it's aimed to lower your cholesterol. Cannabis doesn't work that way. It's not a pill for an ill. It's an equilibrium. It's a balancing agent. And as I mentioned, this system wasn't even discovered. We don't work in mortar between bricks in modern medicine. We have subspecialties, and they kind of dig in their backyard. And cannabis doesn't work that way. It's a sort of cross-system, multimodal actor. So best evidence is really in individual symptoms. We see everybody's grandma talking about how it's helped their sleep, anxiety, pain, nauseousness, appetite stuff. That's really where the best evidence comes. But interesting, even the question, even talking about where's the evidence, show me the evidence. People like, where's the gold standard, the RCT trials, show me the rigorous science. That doesn't work for cannabis. That paradigm is not complete. And we've never, as a human culture, we've never had an example where a plant can do so much. And not a lot of people are aware of this, but one of the reasons we're all sitting here, one of the reasons that cannabis is special is that it is a freak pharmacy. It's a natural production plant. And it's like we were talking earlier, it's like a vegetable buffet. And we don't have plants that do that. You walk in the forest, you'll smell pine, you'll smell mint, you'll smell eucalyptus, you'll smell maybe roses, all of that the enzymes in cannabis produce. And it's the only plant on earth like that. Of course, people latched on to THC because it feels good and CBD for plenty of other reasons. But we don't have anything that works like that in modern medicine. So the system has to change. But basically, when we look at real evidence that will impress the doctor in front of you or the clinical community, this was helping for sleep, for how long, and for which people.
Right. I want to follow up on that very quickly before I loop Victorine in. How should policymakers be thinking about this? Because like you said, cannabis is a botanical, whereas the FDA and federal agencies are set up to regulate molecule mechanism, right? So how do you bring this conversation into agencies like the FDA, into academic journals, medical boards? I imagine that's a tough conversation to have.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
it's never happened before.
Yeah.
But actually, I think Senator Gillibrand hit it on the nail. The framework of dosing, the framework that this stuff works, is indisputable. We all know people that have improved whatever it is from cannabis. So how do we translate that into policy? Actually, what she was talking about, kind of talk about stories, talk about people. And inside the industry, we hear, oh, well, that's anecdote. That's not the sort of high stuff of RCT trials, but actually long-term monitoring of how people are doing is better evidence. We have large data sets. I mean, look at the American culture right now. It's, I think, 17.4 million people consuming cannabis daily, as opposed to alcohol, which is lower than that. More people are consuming cannabis now. So we got to learn about these people, talk to them, share what we're learning with the politicians, and at hand.
Victorine, that's a good place to loop you in from the industry side. some of the biggest criticisms with both medical cannabis and even recreational or wellness cannabis use for sleep or whatever it may be is the inconsistency in dosing, the inconsistency in outcomes. So how can brands like yours, other brands in this room, how can they sort of help educate consumers to pierce the veil of what's marketing, what the science says, and what people should do? Because cannabis is a product that has psychoactive effects, there's setting, all these different things you're thinking about.
Well, the education, of course, is really important. I mean, brands are under a tremendous amount of pressure because there's so many different regulations they need to navigate. So, but it's important that while that happens, they're not alienating the all the different aspects of the plant, like looking at the terpenes and not just focusing on the potency. I find that all markets right now where I see recreational or even medicinal, like when I'm looking at international markets, everything is driven by THC percentage. However, that's not an absolute, and that is not the right way to be looking at it. When I look at things recreationally, I'll see a dispensary menu, and a brand will talk about, they'll mention their strain name, and then they'll list all the various terpenes that are in it, but they're not listing the percentages of that, and they're not explaining to whether it's first starting with the bud tender or the doctor who's administrating. They're not explaining how that affects. Like, for instance, a terpene called pinene. If that is at a 0.2 percentage, it may have a sedative effect. However, if that percentage is increased to 1.2% in combination with a high THC percentage, what happens is that is when the patient or recreational consumer, they start experiencing anxiety. And that impacts the industry negatively, whereas your aunt or your grandfather that needs some sort of support for sleep, they'll go in and they'll get this product, and if they're not being guided to the right ratio, they're going to have a negative effect, and then they'll refrain from using it again, and that'll keep them from medicine that could be tremendously beneficial.
So just to follow up on that, how do you kind of close that gap between that there is nuance to these things, like the terpenes, the compounds you mentioned, there's nuance to how it affects people and how brands claim it, but there's also, some marketers going out there and saying that this will cure X, Y, and Z. How should the industry work to sort of close that gap?
We all have to lock arms. We need to communicate with one another. It's really important that we have medical professionals as advisors to brands or businesses, that there are some educational curriculums implemented in dispensary groups. So things like that. I mean, as a brand, those are the initiatives that I am looking into.
Yeah. Dr. Caplan, on the other side of the ledger, when patients come to you curious about cannabis, or you think that it might be something they should try, how do you separate evidence from marketing claims in the doctor's office?
It's tough. The industry is operating as if marketing claims are sort of promises, and I think the expectation is so above what it needs to be. The claims are more like kind of front of the box highlights as opposed to a nutrition label or something like that. But even, we were talking earlier, even putting terpenes and cannabinoids on a package for consumers, they don't know what to do with that. Like, even their doctors don't know what to do with that. So there's a huge education gap. But I think also people, in my experience with talking to people over time, they want context. They don't want hype. They don't want to hear things that are kind of just pure hope and hype. They want to hear what we know, what we think. If you see an awesome buffet, it all looks kind of healthy. People are going to, be drawn to the things that their body needs, and they'll stay away from the things that aren't going to be good for them. And interestingly, if you eat at a buffet and you're missing vitamin D, as long as you're eating from a pretty broad buffet, your body will absorb that vitamin D or vitamin C. Pick your vitamin. Cannabis offers such a a cornucopia of choices and cornucopia of products even. I mean, you can't really, unless you're aiming for distillates. That's the whole discussion in the community about whole plant versus distillate. You know, distillate is sort of catering to this marketing world, which is all about percentage of THC, as if that's the only thing people care about.
Maybe just describe distillate for
Sure. So
for the room.
distillate,
Yeah,
like
just quickly,
if we squeeze out just THC from this plant. So you take a plant, a cannabis plant. Maybe people don't know this. The top, middle, and bottom of that plant aren't the same thing. They don't produce exactly the same chemistry. That's this freak production plant. But that's hard to sell. It's a thing that doesn't really sell well. People say, oh, it has 23% THC or 50% THC. That, I think marketers can handle, and they can push that out, and it seems better than that other guy or gal that has lower THC percentage. But that's not what people want. You know, the analogy I draw for people is sort of like glasses versus sunglasses. You know, people want a certain prescription of glasses. And if you get that slightly wrong, they're going to get a headache. That doesn't work. But the industry we have now in cannabis is just selling sunglasses. It kind of looks different here and sounds different there, feels different, a little bit swanky over here, but it's not tuned to an individual. It's not getting what they need. And I think that's where the industry needs education. It needs guidance. It needs an army of professionals that we don't even have yet. So there's a lot of room for opportunity. There's a lot of room for growth. I mean, I think that's why we see a lot of the sort of wiping out of industries that just can't survive storms. That we're just starting. I mean, you know, this roller coaster is common among all the cannabis industries that have arisen. We saw this in Canada first. We see it now in South America. We see it in Germany. This is the way it goes. So this is all normal, but we have an opportunity, you know, the people in the room, and we're figuring this out as a culture.
Victorine, I saw you nodding along. Was there anything you'd like to add to that, or?
No, I agree with
Yeah.
everything. These are conversations we've been having offline a
Yeah.
lot, and yeah, it's important. I mean, the one thing that I can add is businesses, whether it's cultivation, whether it's a brand, whether it's retail, in order to implement these things that we're talking about and this education properly, it takes a lot of funding, and it's difficult. People are doing everything they can to survive, and when we're going through these valleys where there isn't such readily available funding, I think that's why a lot of people are going out of business. And simultaneously, a lot of brands are diminishing, you know, taking away from their initial ethos, their integrity, because they just can't maintain it within the climate and the framework within which they need to operate.
Ben, I wanted to pick up on something that you said quickly. And you and I had, I don't know if you remember, you and I had this conversation over the phone, I think a year or two ago. Sort of stuck with me. You know, you said depending on, and it's a messaging question, I'll get to the point of it, when you said that depending on a doctor's practice, they may have very, very different views about cannabis. Adolescent psychiatry sees the negative effects, whereas maybe geriatric care, oncology sees the positive effects. You know, to me, that is a messaging question because they're all able to look at the same evidence and the same results. So how do you have those conversations with your colleagues?
Oh boy, that's really hard. And it's sad because we all kind of have our specialty and we get into our groove, and it's really hard to hear someone else's perspective that's very different. And then, whoops, we have a whole industry where everything is different. You know, it's a real challenge. But I think I see opportunity there. You know, science is the map, and people in the cannabis space are on the terrain. They're on the ground. They see the real world living, how the terrain works. They see the weather. They see the changes. Science doesn't really see that. They see this sort of high perspective, and they're missing all the real life meaning. So I try to give the stories. I try to share what I'm learning from my patients. You know, I have a 75-year-old lady with arthritis and difficulty sleeping. Yep, she's taking her gummies and she's sleeping fine. But you know what? Whenever the opiates get prescribed, she doesn't need them. And that sort of detail is just eluding doctors. And we have this whole country that's addicted to opiates. And cannabis would be the cure. I mean, it's really cut and dry. I mean, I see maybe 20,000 patients who are on opiates, and 90% of them, 91% of them, get off of opiates because of their cannabis. I mean, that would just change the world with just that small fact. If they would listen, if people like me could shout loud enough, or if everybody else who's seeing their doctor would say, hey, can I try cannabis instead of Percocet?
Right. Thinking about this question we've been dancing around, the medical versus recreational dichotomy, I guess, Victorine, I'll address you first. I mean, is this a true dichotomy? Is it a false dichotomy? How do you think about that in your business and your day-to-day, especially with your consumers?
I mean, there's such a wide gap between the two, and simultaneously it's a narrow gap, right? So there are people, like any product that I'm putting out there is recreational, specifically in this state, for instance. But what happens is people are still leaning on their bud tenders for advice in terms of medical ailments. Like, they're not necessarily going
Right.
to a doctor and asking a doctor to prescribe cannabis. They feel comfortable going to their local shop, talking to their bud tender and saying, I need something for sleep, or I need something that'll help with anxiety, but I want to be functioning at work, and I don't want it to be obvious. I don't want to be high, right? So the burden lies on myself and my team to put proper messaging out there about my product. And I want to see other people doing that as well, because every day I'm thinking about how I can do that better.
Yeah. And just to follow up on that, not to get into too esoteric of a discussion about terpenes and plant chemistry, I guess, does your work with these compounds sort of challenge that idea that we can bucket cannabis neatly into these two distinctions?
Yes and no. In one way, my work and my connection with the plant started on a very sensory level. When I started working with terpenes, and specifically the aromatic part of it, right? The science for me personally caught up later, and then I connect with medical professionals or people who have either done their own studies or papers that I've been involved in publishing, or kind of clinical trials that we're starting to fund. They've began to validate what I knew on a sensory level. And what I really love about that is that demonstrates not only how intelligent the plant is, but how intelligent we are, because we can smell something, and if we're attracted to it, there's a level of benefit in that.
And I guess I don't want to sort of keep picking on you, but I think that
it's okay.
brings up a really good point. How can that sort of aroma, sensory science, that patient experience, can that complement clinical trials? And how can scientists and industry work a little bit better to sort of marry that gap?
Well, if the dialogue is there, right, and we're giving whoever is guiding it, right, whether it's the medical professional, whether it's somebody in this room or somebody like myself, I think it's important that we provide those data points, and then they can use their science to either debunk something or validate it. And through that process, I think really profound work is going to happen, because we're going to find other things that none of us have thought of. Like, to Dr. Ben's point, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface. It is one of the most miraculous plant that exists in our world. There's layers, there's terpenes, there's different cannabinoids, there's flavonoids. It just goes on and on and on. And we only talk about the surface buzzwords that, finally got some attention in the last decade, maybe. And we still haven't even figured out what's, the deep science behind those.
Yeah.
Jeremy, may I?
You can.
Because
Yeah,
I
you
got
may.
questions. I got questions here.
Yeah.
One, and this is an obvious one. Dr. Caplan, wouldn't it be great if there was a doctor-approved cannabis handbook?
I was not going to promote. So, yes, and it's available in the library, so this isn't about money. I
want one.
I took 10 years of me slaving away, piecing together what I was learning from patients, and I poured it into here. It's not self-published. This is Random House. I I see patients. I saw one old lady with tumors all over her hands, and she was reluctant to try creams, but I told her about these papers I was reading that sort of looked into stem cell regeneration. You know, like forget umbilical cord stuff, cannabis on the skin, penetrating into deep tissues was stimulating stem cell regrowth, like a big reset button. And we tried it, and I mean, of course, I'm only going to share the really dramatic cases, but her tumors vanished. And fair point, because I'm a scientist, neural sheath tumors also do regress spontaneously, but hers happened to spontaneously regress while she was taking this cream only. And that's an example of this sort of amazing opportunity we have that has never been studied. We know nothing about it. And you know, if you think about for a second, vegans, vegetarians, we all kind of wish we were eating healthier and living healthier lives, and they tend to last longer. People who eat vegetables all the time live longer. People who are vegan and vegetarian have lower rates of tumors. They don't get cancer as much. Well, what do you think is going to happen when we look at people who are consuming cannabis more? They tend to have lower rates of cancer. The cancers tend to bust out of tissues less. You know, there's sort of subtle, amazing features when we're looking at cannabis deeply that are just unbelievable. I mean, imagine how it feels for me, like the square scientist, to start seeing these things and shouting it out to the culture in this book. You know, there's a whole chapter on cancer, and I don't spare anything. You know, I'm laying it all out there. There's, you know, apart from the tumor stuff, cannabis is shaped like a shield. And when you're putting it on your skin, it literally protects against UV light. Have you ever seen a cannabis sunscreen? That industry doesn't exist yet.
No, but we just filed a trademark on that, I think.
Just now, right?
I think.
Good?
I mean, I just did it.
Yeah,
so.
but the OCM wouldn't give us a license.
Yeah. But anyway, I hold nothing back. If people are interested in a guide, this is not a cover-to-cover kind of book. It's a reference for sleep. There's a chapter for sex. There's a chapter for old age, for basically everything I've been learning. It's all here. I brought 40 copies if people want it here, but there's also Amazon in the library. But thank you for the plug.
That wasn't even the question, but it kind of was, because one of the questions has come in, and I'm going to paraphrase, but describe what the endocannabinoid system is and does,
Sure.
even if I didn't discover it, obviously, in the 90s. Like,
Sure.
in shorthand, and then,
Sure.
Victorine, also, how do people describe it to you or you to people?
So endocannabinoid system is the most widespread communication system in the body. You know, in the cancer example, one of the things that when cancer takes over a cell, it kind of gums up the communication system. So the cell isn't getting signals to self-destruct, which is the way our body normally kills cancer cells. Cannabis has a way to sneak through the cell and reactivate that system. You know, in most of the industry, you hear it as an equilibrium thing. It's a balancing agent. When people take cannabis, it tends to. Let me give a different example. We all know happy-go-lucky people. No matter what happens, they're always smiling and cheery, snow or rain notwithstanding. We also know curmudgeon-y, grumpy, just jerks. No matter what happens, no matter how happy they could be, they're just a pain in the butt. How do we explain that? We don't really have a paradigm for that. That I explain through the endocannabinoid system. One person is endocannabinoid deficient. They don't have as rich an endocannabinoid system. The other person is endocannabinoid flush. One of the things we all have to look forward to as we age is we all have more pain, we sleep worse, we're all a little bit more grumpy. Does that sound familiar? We also know that as we age, our endocannabinoid tone wanes. It fails over time. So think about that from a business perspective. Which is the group of people that's most likely to benefit from cannabis? Seniors, geriatrics. And lo and behold, that's the truth. So, you know, this is sort of the science I'm in, is kind of piecing together the public health stuff and the real life experiences for people. That's the endocannabinoid system.
May I ask, the topical that you used on this patient, what was it, an RSO oil?
I can't find products. I don't literally have the time to find products that produce what the science tells them to produce because none of them are reading it. So I actually do the nerdy thing, which is tell people what they should make, and I have them make it at home. I mean, I don't want to be seen as bought and sold by an industry. I mean, I think that's the white coat I wear. But also the industry isn't scientific enough, isn't consulting medical expertise or scientific expertise to produce products, which is crazy, isn't it? Like they're thinking about it just through a marketing lens. How can I sell this product? How can I make it
Agreed.
smell nice?
Yeah. I love that. I wonder, like, so she just grew her own and then made the oil?
No, she didn't. She bought the cannabis from a store, and I told her what the percentage
And you
was.
told her
per-
how to make the oil?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. But, you know,
Yeah.
to sort of folks in your corner, I don't know how to make it attractive for her. I don't know how to make it smell the way she wants it to smell. I know sort of what components will help her disease, but I don't know how to get her to keep taking it because she doesn't want to smell like weed.
Well, she could put some botanicals in there. She could combine some lavender oil. I can give it to you. I can give you some recipes.
This is the industry collaboration we
This
need.
is why we're having this.
Right.
It's a different handbook.
There's ways that you can absolutely cut that pungent scent. However, I think for potency, and I'm not the doctor, but the most potent version of it at night, because I've met people in a parking lot in the middle of the night, and I had to get RSO oil for somebody, and there was one source that I had. Somebody close to me had a cancer diagnosis, and I was having a meltdown. So I went in the middle of the night, and I got the RSO oil, and it was terrible, and it was pungent, but guess what? They're in remission.
Wow.
Can I ask one last question, Jeremy, before you yell at me?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no, we won't yell at you.
And this goes back almost to the first conversation or where we are in sort of the public conversation about medical cannabis. And that is, do you think from a physician's perspective, other physicians will look at Schedule 3 and say, oh, now it's not Schedule 1, now I'm more open to it? Do you think it opens the conversation to practitioners? Will more people get the handbook?
The discussion has to happen on a lot of fronts in our culture. The professional community has to get involved. Politicians have to make it seem like it's not a deadly substance, has zero value. I mean, that's just stupid. But people have to want it. They have to use it, which is sort of already happening. So all these pieces are kind of pushing forward at the same time. You know, the scheduling discussion is a really big can of worms. It's not simple. If it is rescheduled, people who are selling legally in the state, are they selling a Schedule 3 substance now, which they can't do from the DEA rules? Like, there's a lot of messy stuff to unclean. But the most important thing is people have to talk about what's useful for them. They have to educate their doctors. I mean, shockingly, I've watched this change over the last 20 years. You know, it used to be doctors would say, don't do that. What are you, stupid? You're going to be on your way to cocaine and heroin and prostitution in no time. And that changed over time to, I don't know, do what you're going to do. Maybe try a medical dispensary, but they all look the same, so it's, you know, not clear to the doctors. Now, actually, I get referrals from doctors before they send their patients on a path. Like, this is totally amazing. And it's not all cancer patients. I have pulmonology patients, lung doctors who are sending me their asthma patients. And that seems crazy. But if you look at asthma medicine, it's anti-inflammatories. And cannabinoids are some of the strongest anti-inflammatories we have. Mm-hmm. And the medical community hasn't learned that, but they're hearing it from their patients. So it's kind of awesome to watch organically.
That's great.
Do we have time for one more? Or are we?
Hit it, brother.
Quick question, big question. Looking ahead 5 years, what is, Dr. Caplan, start with you, the most exciting medical development in the cannabis space?
Oh boy, wow, so many. I mean, I think we're going to see the clinical community get on board. I mean, as I said, the sort of trajectory is already headed that way. I've been working with insurance companies through some of my companies to get them on board. Like, insurance wants to spend less for accidents at the clinic and hospital. They want to spend less on their own pharmaceuticals. They stand to gain a lot by sponsoring cannabis, by covering cannabis products. Some insurance companies already cover care and workers' comp, but that's going to be a huge behemoth also on the list of kind of groups in the culture that will get on board for us to win here. So education, the clinics, the institutions, I think we need to see the industry really blossom, and not just kind of marketing terms, but what is this really doing for people reliably? And that still hasn't happened yet.
Victorine, same question. What's the most exciting development that you can fathom in the next 5 years?
I mean, to our earlier points about clinical validation, I'm really excited for a lot of these things to come out and be the validity to be out there. I'm also excited for more transparency and truth. I think a lot of bad acting is getting weeded out. I want to see that politically in business, with cultivation, with products. The people that are actually coming at this industry with integrity and a proper code of ethics, I want to see their brands expand and thrive.
That's a good place to wrap it. Victorine, Dr. Caplan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The actual handbook.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it's so great to see a panel like this to have these conversations, because even all the medical operators that started in New York, let's get real, they all started with the thought that I'll be the first in there, and then when it becomes recreational, I'll just flip and get a recreational license. What are they carrying different than we're carrying? That how do dispensaries educate the people who are making FaceTime with the customer know more information that can help the customer from a medical perspective? And for some reason, the 2 and 2 haven't gone hand to hand. As they talked about marketing, right? We're all trying to build our businesses with great brands, but no one is really talking about the real effects. And there should be something that we should get from New York State that we could, give those people behind the counter some kind of validation that they can actually talk about these things with their customers on the other side of the counter.
See?
Yeah.
Yes. You can clap. It's good.
Yes, yeah,
It's
please
all
do.
good.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, because what's coming down the pipeline is mushrooms, psychedelics. Are they all going to be
You can clap
spelled
for
in
that, too.
dispensaries? Are they going to be spelled at CVS? Yes.
But it's kind of that frontline, interactions that they get. Yes, no official audience brands to push, depending on who's going to motivate them, what brands they like. But really, what it comes down to is that feedback they're getting every day. That's what's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I get emails all the time from people who are like, my mother has cancer, my father can't sleep, and what it may be. And I'm like, come into the store, and they're all very educated, but this is a whole different level of education, and it's such, it's inspiring to hear about the plant, which I also agree is like, the wonder drug.
That's why you love it so much.
That's why I love it so much. Exactly.
We're going to shift gears for a second. We have a short segment with Will Brophy from NABIS. He's going to be in the hot seat. Let me just describe. The hot seat is a series of, I think it's going to be 5 or 6 questions that are like rapid fire, so we're going to go through this quickly. I appreciate people asking questions. We're trying to get to them through the QR code, so thank you for that. Thank you for watching online. Will, you are going to be in the center seat. Joanne, you're going to be in the far seat. I'm going to be in the near seat. Ready?
I'm ready.
Hot seat, Will.
Feels hot.
Turn on this little button and your rear's going to...
Yeah, it's like my Volkswagen.
Good.
All right, Joanne, do you want to start, or you want me to start?
You can start.
Okay.
Go for it.
Will, you're in the hot seat, the very first hot seat of the Highrise, but not the last. What is the likelihood, 0 to 100%, that cannabis is officially rescheduled this year? And what's the one thing most people misunderstand about what rescheduling actually fixes?
Sure. I think it's 95% likely.
Whoa.
I do.
And if
Perhaps
not, we're coming back. Yeah.
perhaps optimistic, but I do think it's about 95%. And I think the biggest misconception, perhaps not in this room, but more broadly, is that it means broad-based federal legalization. I think it means a lot to the industry, particularly in terms of 280E clarity and in terms of sort of foundation for things like safe banking. But I think the largest misconception is that the work is done and that we're at a finish line. And really, I think this is more like the starting line for normalization. And we're really just starting to walk away from the war on drugs towards the promised land.
The promised land, I like it.
Very, very positive.
For
Very
now, anyway.
optimistic.
They like weed in the
I
promised
like
land too, just
Yeah.
by way of,
The seat will be much hotter if I'm wrong.
you're coming back.
Okay, and, well, the second one was, okay, we're good to go. We're going to start at number 2, all
Yes.
right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would meaningful banking reform be for operators in practice, not in theory? 1, barely noticeable, and 10 is an industry-changing experience.
I think it would be 10. I think it would be direct for some operators, indirect for others, but I can't imagine a world where safe banking wouldn't impact every single operator somehow.
The next question is a hot seat question. Are you ready? Because some of these people are in the room. A through F, how would you grade New York's cannabis rollout so far? And what's the single biggest reason for that grade?
Sure. I think I would grade it a C so far, and I would describe it as ambitious and great intentions, but often clumsy execution. I think whether it's licensure, track and trace rollout, there's all sorts of examples, but I think the best intentions haven't been rolled out in the smoothest of ways.
I agree with that. I like the C. Okay.
It's very diplomatic.
It's very diplomatic, for sure, sure. Okay. If you were starting your own company today, what part of the business would you be most worried about over the next 18 months? Regulation, pricing, capital, or competition?
I think the answer today is the same, and for the next 18 months is the same as it was 5 years ago. I think it's access to capital. I'm biased because I work in the distribution industry, and it is brutally expensive, especially to build the infrastructure to build scale. But I think that's true of almost all cannabis businesses. I think they're more expensive and more challenging than almost any newcomer realizes, and they realize it over time. But access to capital is the single hardest thing to deal with.
Yeah, there is none.
We're going to talk about that in the next panel. Question 5, and I do have a question 6 after this, even though we only promised 5
okay.
questions. Fast forward 1 year. That's like how Jeremy starts all his questions. What's more likely? A, fewer but stronger operators. B, more operators still struggling. C, a real rebound moment.
I want the answer to be C, but and the optimist in me wants to say C. I think the pragmatist in me says a combination of A and B. I suspect the retail side of the business will consolidate and perhaps strengthen as a result. I think the brand side of the industry will continue to struggle, and there'll be more players.
Okay, last question.
No, I have another one, but you.
No,
so
no,
2
go
more.
ahead, Jay, go.
No, you go.
Okay. We're sitting here a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
What's changed?
I think a year from now, hopefully, we've rescheduled. But I think we're likely to be dealing with some new problems, particularly around the rising credit risk in the industry in New York. And I think we'll be on the other side of a painful rationalization of businesses, where there's a lot of people right now who are optimistic about collecting from retailers that can't pay. And I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about New York's cannabis market is there's a sense of optimism that ripples throughout the industry. And I hope that optimism stays, but I think a year from now, there's going to be a little bit more sobriety in the room, no pun intended.
Well, New Yorkers in general are optimistic people, I think.
Speaking of painful rationalization, actually, that is my next question. Someone asked, I think it might have been Rick, I think he may have even written, for real, what's the difference between the New York and California markets? For real. For real.
Versus the weather,
Yeah, not the weather.
not the weather.
I think the biggest difference is the point in time of the industry. California's market has been through a lot of cycles and is more on the mature side, for better and for worse, and it is both. I think New York still has the optimism. Both have really strong brands, really strong people working in it. But I think California has come back down to earth in many ways, and there is an underlying pessimism that actually exists in California pretty much across the board that I don't see in New York. And my hope is that New York can learn from the parts of California that's worked and the parts that hasn't. But right now, I think, the sort of cycle, where they are in the cycle of maturity is the most profound difference, because there's strong operators in both markets.
Okay, good
Yeah.
answers.
That was good.
Very positive.
I like the hot seat. We'll do
I
everybody
try.
next
Yeah,
next time.
I like the hot seat.
Will,
Thank you
thanks so
guys.
much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Just got to resituate.
Okay, let's get in there.
Joanne.
Yes, let's
when
talk.
when we first
Yes.
were putting together the agenda, and even up until last week, the next panel is called "Making Cannabis Investable Again," sort of a play on MAGA or
Yes.
Messiah in this case. And you joked that we should drop the again,
Yes,
that it maybe never was investable.
I don't think
we
it
should-
ever was investable.
Sorry, 2015. Yeah.
2015. I mean, I think there was a short period of time where it was investable, but I think that there's been this narrative from particularly the state level, which is, oh my God, you're going to open this business and no problem. There's going to be completely tons of money that's going to be invested in your one little dispensary. And that just never happened because it never would have happened. It was completely unrealistic as someone who's been in the industry of investing in the tech space and what investors look for. And what they look for is a tremendous return on their capital and billion-dollar businesses. And so to think that you have a dispensary, one loan dispensary, and that you're going to get venture money or private equity money is just kidding yourself. So is it investable?
We're going to find out.
On our next panel.
We're going to find out on our next panel. I want to welcome up Dan Fromer, Carter Lewis, and Tony Repanich. And they will let Joanne know if it's possible to make cannabis investable again.
Or not.
Or not. Dan?
Or not. Wow, the seat is still hot. I love it. So, crazy fact that I was not expecting, but if you actually look at the last year, the cannabis ETF outperformed the S&P. But if you look at the 5-year chart, it's down 90% when the S&P is up 90%. So, it's all timing, I suppose. Anyway. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be really interesting. My name is Dan Fromer. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of The New Consumer, a publication obsessed with how and why people spend their time and money. I also spend a lot of time around early-stage consumer VCs who are investing in everything but cannabis, basically. And so I was really delighted that Joanne asked me to participate here, because I think as someone who spends some time in the cannabis space but not most of my time, hopefully I have a bit of a more, at least a less impassioned perspective about some of this stuff. And I'd love to welcome my co-panelists as well, too, Carter and Tony. I suppose it would be easier if you all just did a quick intro, kind of who you are and what your view of the world is, and then we can kind of get into the content.
Sure. My name is Carter Lewis. I'm the founder and managing partner of Aquinnah Capital. We're a brand new investment fund in cannabis. Yes, you heard that right. And my view on the world is that cannabis has always been investable. At the fund level, it's been really hard because that requires you to repeat a good outcome. And that's been really challenging. But at the asset level, plenty of people have done well. So my view is that, I believe that I can, create a pool of solid performing assets in cannabis.
And you've also worked as an operator.
I have.
Yeah.
I guess that's a key point. I got my start in operations. I worked at Jushi Holdings starting in 2018. I spent 3.5 years there, and then I moved over to the investing side, spent a few years at Casa Verde Capital, which is an investment firm on the equity side of cannabis, and Aquinnah Capital is my newest venture, and we kind of play in the hybrid debt and equity space.
Great. And Tony.
I'm Tony Repanich. I'm the CEO of Shield Compliance. We work with banks and credit unions around the country who serve the legalized cannabis industry. We have about 8,000 licensed operators on our platform through our partner financial institutions. We're working with those institutions on first deposit taking, but longer term, how they get into the lending space, which many have started to do.
Great. Before we get into too many details, I would love to just get your sense of kind of the state of play with investing. You are investors, and you sit with investors every day, so they exist. Is it primarily debt? Are there equity investors? What is the current state of play in the market?
Well, I think we've seen over the last few years that more of the money that's coming into the industry, especially as the capital markets slowed down, has been debt. And for operators, getting bank financing is going to be probably the best term. So our thought is, how do you get more bankers to see this as a viable space for them to lend into? Bankers have been hesitant to enter this space, and so their appetite is limited so far. I mean, for many of these businesses, I was looking at a statistic from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, like 70% of businesses that start today won't be here in 5 years. Much of the industry is less than 5 years old. And so I think for bankers, that provides some level of concern. And so they've been hesitant. I think real estate is where they're most comfortable and where most of the money has been deployed, although they're starting to venture into other asset classes like equipment, vehicles, specialized equipment. Accounts receivable is a little bit more challenging given sort of some of the economics that accounts receivables right now for the industry.
Great. And Carter, you are focusing on mostly on store operators.
Yes.
What does that market look like today?
Yeah, so, I think based on my experience operating and investing, particularly in today's world where liquidity and distributions seems to be paramount for investors, I kind of looked at the kind of supply chain and the different aspects of the cannabis space that are investable with what investors are looking for in mind, and thought that, where can I find the nearest term cash flows for the least amount of money? Vertically integrated operations have different elements of them that cost different amounts of money. And to me, retail was the lowest barrier to entry from a check size. And there are plenty of them all over the country. And in certain markets, New York being one of them, there are lots and lots of underserved localities with, strong operators who just need capital to build out the store. So, I think in time, as we get some of these catalysts and, the makeup of the sector looks different, things will change. But, raising a new fund in cannabis today, as you can imagine, investors are very, very insistent upon understanding the timing of paybacks and visibility on distributions. And so, that's kind of how we think about it.
Cool. We are going to try to be constructive today and optimistic. So let's tackle that. What makes an attractive store? What makes you want to take the risk and deploy capital into a store? What are some of the traits and characteristics?
100%. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to start a debt fund, really, instead of an equity fund, is I don't necessarily always know the answer to that. And operators do. I'm no longer an operator. And so my job is not to tell you, how much you should spend on your marketing or how many point of sale kiosks you need. My goal is to partner with operators who I trust know the answer to that, because they're the ones that have to run the store. I'm not going to do that. And what I can say from our experience is that typically having a tight handle on your budget is important, and understanding that this is cannabis and the cannabis consumer is different than other types of consumers. Price and potency are typically the main things people talk about and care about. So when I see $2, $3, $4 million budgets for build outs, I scratch my head and I probably pass, to be honest. But my job is not to tell you how to run your business.
Are there, let's make sure we really get it. So are there specific states that you're really excited about and others you won't touch? Is it more on a regional basis? I saw a great chart in Cultivated that seems to suggest there's stores on Long Island doing $30 million a year in sales.
Yeah.
That's a lot more than a Chipotle. So what do you look for in terms of that?
For sure. And I don't want to discourage anyone in the room or listening if I mention a state negatively, so I won't do that. But the states that I am particularly focused on are limited license, adult use markets that are, within 2 to 3 years old, maybe even, newer than that, where price compression hasn't taken over, and there's decent enforcement on the illicit market, so that I can be, relatively confident that, an investment into your asset will be able to service, the debt and pay me back in a reasonable period of time. So states like New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, Illinois, and then others. But with others, much more specifically focused on the geography within the state. So like you talk about Long Island and New York, other counties of other states that I might not have mentioned.
One more thing on this, and then we'll get to something else. But what makes a great store from a financial returns perspective? Is it a beautiful store that has a great selection? Is it staffing? Is it just location? Is it the truth of all retail is location? What is it in your experience?
You could ask everyone in this room that, and I think you get different answers. I'd say that there isn't a one size fits all, but I'd say location is paramount. And then right up there with location is the strength of the management team. This is a people business. There's no bankruptcy, there's no collections. If I lend you $1 million and you run away with it, I'm probably screwed. So I need to really believe that we're going to be. I mean, obviously, that's not true. My lawyer's in the room somewhere. But I need to trust that we have a working relationship, and so I spend a ton of time with different management teams and just making sure that they have a sound plan and the location is strong. And if something goes wrong, I have backup operators to fill the store if I need to. But that hasn't been an issue yet.
Great.
I would add one thing to what Carter said, and that's I think about you can have a grocery outlet and a Whole Foods within a block of each other, and they have very different strategies. They're both grocery stores. They're both dispensaries, whatever, right? And those management teams, though, have very specific idea of who their customer is, how they price, what kind of throughput they need through their store. So you can have cheap weed if you have a very sound strategy around your costs and how you're doing that versus a premium store. So I think Carter's right. There's not one single attribute that makes a store win, but people who try to be everything to everybody, they never win.
Yeah. More broadly, besides just retail, you sit with a lot of different financial institutions that are putting capital into cannabis. What is appealing to them? What's attractive to them this year in the space?
Well, I think for many of our bankers, they've pulled back a little bit, but they're continuing to, they see the biggest opportunities continue to be more on the wholesale side of the business. There's a lot of capital being invested there. There's a lot of real estate needs on that side and improvements to those facilities that they can finance. I think what they're looking at is making sure that if for some reason an operator needs to come out of that location, what is the green premium that's been assigned to that piece of real estate? And have they protected themselves if somebody else needs to move into that space that has nothing to do with the cannabis industry? So you see that then they're pushing down the loan to value, how much they're willing to lend out on that property and protecting themselves. I think one thing that maybe sometimes the cannabis industry doesn't always see is that bankers in general have tightened their credit box for all borrowers over the last few years with uncertainty about interest rates and inflation. And so hopefully as they begin to loosen those things up, as they're not worried about increasing rates as much as they have been over the last year. And other things, they start to widen that aperture, have greater risk tolerance for things. But I think even just the run-of-the-mill business would say it's getting harder to get a bank loan than it was 2 years ago. Keep in mind, most banks out there, and why they love the cannabis industry, actually, the ones that are banking it, is they're liability sensitive, which means when rates go up, their costs go up faster than loans reprice. So everybody thinks, oh, well, loans just cost more. The bank must make more. But in fact, their cost of deposits go up much more quickly than the yield that they make on those loans. So it's one of the reasons that cannabis has been a good hedge for them, because they generally pay no interest on those deposits. So as the yields on loans go up, that you get a wider margin, they're happier than ever.
I love it. Explain green premium to me, because that's not a term I use every day, and perhaps others may not be familiar with it too. Is it more expensive or is it less expensive?
It's more expensive. So if you're renting, if you're renting a piece of property, the landlord's going to say, "Well, you're cannabis, so you're going to pay more," and that's the green premium that gets assigned to things. But I mean,
what does that tend to be? What's the percentage generally?
I don't know if there's just a hard percentage on that, but if you want to take an extreme example, you could say, hey, in California, there's tons of vacant greenhouses that were vacant for years, all of a sudden looked very attractive to the industry in 2018 and 2019 for cannabis. And so all of a sudden they were worth a fortune because you could put cannabis in there. Cannabis comes out of there, there's nothing to go back in there. They were vacant for 10 years prior to that. So the green premium was 100% on those. And so I think the challenge is for financial institutions, and the regulators care about this too. They ask the bank specifically, what happens if this high rent value or this extraordinary value that's been assigned to this property because of the cash flow that can be generated because there's a cannabis business in that facility goes away? What's your collateral going to be worth? And so that's where they're spending a lot of their time. And sometimes that's to the detriment of the cannabis industry because they're paying the premium on all these things, but the bank isn't willing to finance it.
Yeah. Carter, or maybe Joanne, what's the green premium on New York storefront real estate? Is there one, or is it?
I mean, oh my God, don't even send me down the real estate hole. I mean, it's
steep.
The cost of real estate is not what it should be.
Yeah.
And we can all thank the banks for that. And so if they were priced at what the market actually is bearing, then I think it would be a lot easier for any kind of storefront.
So I noticed none of you, well, neither of you, but none of you, mentioned brands, which are a huge part of the industry, and as someone who spends most of their time obsessing over consumer brands, I found the cannabis industry to be, in many ways, a playground for design, community building, although with a lot less access to the tools that even alcohol brands have at their disposal. Sounds like you're not at all interested in investing in cannabis brands. Is that structural, or is that because it's not a good place to put money right now?
Yeah, well, look, I think indirectly I'm certainly investing in brands because by financing retail build-outs, ultimately those retailers sell brands. But I get your point. Yeah, look, I think my personal experience with brands has been limited. When I was at Jushi, my role on the kind of biz dev M&A side was largely acquiring or buying retail stores. And then whenever we did look at brand acquisitions, we would kind of look at the data, and granted the data sets are much more comprehensive now than they were 6-7 years ago. But based on our findings, the top selling brands in almost every dispensary were the in-house brand of that dispensary. So if you're from a M&A perspective, trying to calculate the return on an investment you're going to make, it is hard to make the case that a brand is worth acquiring. That being said, there are plenty of case studies that show great outcomes for brands. Granted, maybe not as many as we'd like to see, but I think it would be silly to say that brands aren't the future of this space. I think that's kind of well known. I just don't know. It would be hard for me to underwrite the value of a brand today because of how challenging the economics are. The state-by-state regulation makes it next to impossible to get any kind of economies of scale if you're going to try and be in more than one state, which you kind of have to be if you want to be attractive.
And thus we see mergers like wild.
Yeah.
Is there loyalty? Is there brand loyalty? Obviously, to the private label, that's probably most about price and
sure,
potency. But
sure. There's loyalty, but not loyalty in the sense of other industries. I mean, how many people do you know will walk out of a dispensary if the exact strain they were looking for wasn't there, as opposed to if you're a cigarette smoker and they don't have Marlboro Reds, you actually might leave. Right. Or if you really wanted your Casamigos and they don't have it, like, you might leave. And I think cannabis is still such a nascent industry that, at least amongst my peers and the folks I've been around in the space, I said it before, but price and potency are kind of key. And because brands are hard to scale, people aren't going to go out of their way necessarily to hunt down that one thing they had that one time, because chances are it's not going to be available.
hey, half a Camino or nothing, man.
Right.
Yeah.
One day, by the way, I'm sure that will be the case.
Yeah. Excellent. When I speak with venture investors in the consumer world, the thing that lights up their eyes, at least right now, until up about a month ago, were the soda brands that were exploding. This week, the United Center in Chicago announced they were going to start selling THC soda at, not at Bulls games, but I guess at concerts and that sort of stuff. The Bulls are not watching with a THC soda right now. But curious, and obviously there's the hemp drink loophole, maybe ending, maybe not ending, but what's that investment scene look like to you? Is that exciting to your partner? Obviously not to banks that are doing debt loaning, but is that exciting in concept to investors in the space right now, or kind of wait and see at this moment?
Well, I think on the bank side, the bankers have largely seen hemp as being more confusing than actually state legal cannabis, because at least at the state level, there's clear controls, there's licensing. And so bankers have largely stayed away from a lot of that hemp work, with the exception of some larger farms and things like that. But I think when it comes to the product manufacturing side, there's been a lot of concerns about, states were already being aggressive about trying to outlaw things, a lot of uncertainty about product liability. And so I think the grand compromise we get out of what the Congress did with the continuing resolution is it's going to force the hand of the industry to make some concessions on the intoxicating hemp side, to agree to some better controls, labeling, packaging. I don't think we're going to wipe out that whole $30 billion industry, but it's going to look different and have way better controls, which is what I think everybody wanted. We just took the nuclear option to get there.
Thank you, alcohol lobbyists or whatever.
Yeah.
Fascinating. What are you saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything Tony said, and I think you said it when you phrased the question. You said you talked to venture investors, and I think one thing that's made Aquinnah Capital a little bit easier for folks to understand is that we're not a venture fund. We're a structured credit fund, and so when I pitch to investors, they can immediately get the thought of 10x returns out of their head, because I'm not promising that. I'm not going to get you that. What's nice is I benchmark my return profile against other credit funds. And so when you think about other private credit, which happens to be a hot industry right now, private investment firms are showing high single-digit returns, maybe low teens, which is incredible for a loan. But when I introduce something that's higher than that, and it just so happens to be because I'm in a higher risk industry, that kind of like for like comparison seems to resonate with people. And so, yes, I think hemp has a place, and I think it'll all get sorted out. But I've been very upfront that I'm not interested in home runs. My goal is to generate a mid to high teens return in an industry, or an asset class rather, that typically gets the mid to single digit returns.
Great. And if you say 10x, I would say just 10x. Come on.
Right.
It's interesting though, because when we poll consumers, like for example, THC soda, young consumers think of it as much healthier than alcohol, especially young men who live in cities. They're really into it, and it seems to have actually beyond the state dispensary system cracked into a somewhat mainstream audience only because of a like very kind of cavalier, like, you know, screw everything, we're just going to start doing this thing, which would be impossible with something like flower, well, unless you're a New York bodega owner, I guess. But anyway, cool. So what is exciting to you right now this year? Is it new markets? Is it something else changing? Is it just the potential of regulatory systems opening up? What excites you right now?
Well, I think the 95% chance of,
right.
of rescheduling.
love it.
I mean that 280E change will be huge. I realize businesses have already been creative with that 280E accounting, but you know, the government estimates their revenues get cut in half, so that money goes back into licensed operators, and bankers like cash flow, and so that additional cash going through those businesses will make them better borrowers, and so we're really looking forward to seeing that happen for the industry. I also think that while consolidation, it means there'll be some winners and losers in that. We'll probably get stronger management teams, and bankers still care a lot about character. You know, Carter mentioned, you know, spending time with management teams, understanding what their strategy is and what they're doing, and so hopefully I'm looking forward to seeing sort of a strengthening of the industry because of some of the headwinds that they've been adjusting to over the last few years.
Yeah, I guess I'm slightly less optimistic, as my friend Will, who is in the hot seat here. But I think that, you know, a lot of us who have been in this industry for a long time often forget that the outside world is not focused on us, like at all. And I learned that for the first time this past year when I was fundraising. I walked into every investor meeting with a silly assumption that everyone across the table from me knew the very basics about this industry. And the questions I was asked shocked me. You know, what is medical versus adult use mean? Like that level of, you know, just no base understanding. And those are the people.
You talking about the reefer man? Yeah.
Those are the people. You know, we talk about needing these catalysts to attract capital and institution, blah, blah, blah. Sure, and I hope that happens ASAP. But in the interim, there are people who just aren't paying attention. And so that is what I'm excited for, just to continue to turn over rocks and find people who have just, because they haven't been interested, no one has tried hard enough, they've just kind of written it off as, whatever, I don't want to do that. I'm focused on them because there are a lot of them, and they can be swayed.
And I would say that education extends to consumers too, because
100,000%.
you know, I hear a story of like even just a THC soda trial at certain venues for entertainment, and they don't sell because people don't know what they are, and that's because brands are so fragmented. And so I think it is interesting. There's a huge education problem, I think, at all levels. Do we have audience questions? How are we doing? Yeah. Okay, great. Let's do those.
We do. I'm going to meld a couple of them together. But
Cool.
This is one. Rescheduling, whether it's 95% or something higher or lower than that in the next year. Like, does that, or how does it bring net new investors into the space? Is it like people are going to give it a new eye because it's this Schedule 3, or there's better cash flow at some of these businesses because 280 went away? Like, is your sense that there will be a new wave of investment because of some federal regulation that happens?
Or do we have to wait for federal
Or do we have to wait for federal legalization or descheduling?
My quick answer, kind of based on what I just said, wave with a very small W. I think that we have overestimated how many people are just like waiting, because I just, that would have happened by now. But there are some people that are waiting, but more of the people just don't know what the hell rescheduling means.
Right.
So when it happens, they will probably get alerted by the news sources that report it, and they may or may not decide to open that article and read about it. But it is a big deal for all of us, obviously. And part of my job is to bang the table and educate people on what it actually means. So yeah.
And then also to add to that, like there's an entire other process that has not started of strategics acquiring brands or like meaningful consolidation or IPOs or anything like that that then inspires LPs to invest in funds, that invest in brands, that do all this stuff. So, and that will take a very long time after any of this stuff happens, I think. Yeah.
I mean, with rescheduling, a majority of the cannabis industry today is still going to be in conflict with federal law. I mean, most of the cannabis industry is adult use. That is not what Schedule 3 is. So what's going to be really important, what's going to drive investment and bank appetite and all those things will be how the administration, from an administrative viewpoint, starts making decisions about how to interpret this change. What does FDA come out with in terms of guidance? What does the SBA say about this? You know, they secure tons of loans for businesses across the country that are in these growth stages, right? That would be a big changer for banks in the space. USDA does a ton of farm guarantee loans. Does that allow them to get into this space? And I think the one place you will start to see investment right away is in the research side, because that's really been largely cut off in the US. And so I think there'll be a high interest in research.
Good.
That is good.
Yeah.
I do have, there's another question, and this is, we talked about brands, we talked about businesses with actual physical assets or real estate. One part of the industry that is happening in very small ways, but I think we'll see more, is consumption lounges and or events that actually have cannabis. Like, I don't know if the question is even like, does that make it more investable, or does that even change the landscape of how people think about the product?
I think when people show me their plans for constructing a new build on the retail side, and there is a consumption lounge or event space associated with it, I am relatively neutral on that as a thing. I have yet to see any meaningful correlation with like revenue growth or any kind of return metric based on the availability of drive-through or consumption or sorry, not drive-through, consumption lounge or event space. That being said, I do think it is a trend that will continue, which is a good thing in terms of just normalization. But I couldn't honestly tell you that, yes, do consumption because I'm going to invest if you know.
Do consumption because it's fun, but
Exactly.
just kidding.
Right.
Tony, do you?
I don't think mainline commercial bankers are going to extend their credit window. That's not going to be the first place that they go.
Fair enough.
If you think you've seen NIMBYs, just wait.
Yeah.
I'm tapped.
Okay, great. Well, I love what all of you said tonight, and I do think that I hope rescheduling leads to more research, but I don't think that the outside world is focused on us, which is really why we did this event today, which is the Highrise, because we need to bring more operators across the entire spectrum together. We're obviously not short on any ideas. I think that we're all pretty much an optimistic group, but we're a very frustrated group. And that we need to keep talking about cannabis and research and banking and building out brands and also the key component, which is education, right? Because I can't tell how many people I come across and like, oh, so like, is it legal in New York? It's like, yeah. Like, where do you get it from? Only New York, right? And so people just don't know, right? Unless you're in it. And so I think that says a lot about people, but it also says a lot about the industry and how much farther we have to go.
And I think some of those people are in the House of Representatives.
I think you're correct.
Well, some of the Senate as well.
Yes, yes. But we're going to take a bus up there and we're going to change their minds.
Sure.
Say gift bags, press trips, like all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, Carter, and Dan, thank you so much. We're
Thank
going to
you.
welcome
Thank
you
you.
off, and then we're going to wrap and go to the party.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So this was the inaugural Highrise. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank again our presenting partners, MFNY and NABIS, our supporting partners, Fierstein and Kulik, and Dutchy, and our community partners, PAX, Heirloom, Green Thumb Industries, Jaunty, Salt Pay, and Metric. there I got through it in one breath. I want to thank, this is the best, the Cultivated team. Jeremy? Yeah, that's the whole Cultivated team. Yeah, Jeremy, that's the whole team. And then I'd also like to thank the Gotham team, Jesse, Alex, Anesia, Jordan, Johnny, Ashley, Lauren, and Belle, whose name is not Belle, I realized today. Ms. Rachel, thank you so much for all of you for all the work that went into this, which was not none. Thank the team here in this room, Ryan and Bobby and Eric and the rest of the crew. Thank you so much. We're not done with announcements, but you can clap for them because this place is amazing, and we're coming back.
Yes, we are coming back on October 22nd. And, you know, if you have things that you think we should be talking about in the industry, send me an email. Because tonight was two topics that we felt really have not been discussed enough, particularly research. You know, banking seems to be moot. You know, what should we be talking about in the months to come? And you'll be seeing content from us in the months to come as we go and talk to operators across the state and what are their thoughts about the industry at large.
Yeah, we're coming to Hoosick Falls. We're coming to Syracuse. We're doing a whole, we'll be in Buffalo. It's going to be a whole road trip with Jay and Joanne on the bus. We'll talk about the after party in a second. This is the shameless self-promotion part, cultivated.news. Find us there. Also, you're going to get an email from this, if you signed up, obviously, talking about what, as Joanne said, what you do want to talk about at the Highrise, because we do want to hear from you. We do want it to be engaged. We do want it to be differentiated from what else is in the world now and moving forward. And if you like this event in New York, come back in October. And if you have interest in what's happening in the Midwest, March 12th, Cultivated and our partners at Grown in Chicago, we're having an event that's called the Midwest Cannabis Forum. You can find it originally midwestcannabisforum.com. Super easy to remember. You can find us there. Similarly, you apply to attend. There's great demand, so please do that over the next couple of weeks. You'll get an email about that as well. And we have an after party.
Yes, where you get your bags.
Yes.
Because in cannabis land, because it is not federally legal, and this is a nonprofit organization that has been absolutely fabulous, the lawyer said, we cannot have weed distributed here even though it's a gift. So we're going to distribute at the bar down the street who has no idea that they have weed in the bag.
Yes. And that's a wrap.
And that's a wrap. So down the street to Houston Hall. Thank everyone so much for coming.
Oh.
And please, I would love to hear from you. Keep your lanyards so when you're there at the bar after getting stoned outside, this is what's going to get you your free drink.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.